We are live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, and it's that time of evening when we engage with you on matters that affect you, matters that affect your family, matters that affect your community. Tonight, the president is in sharp focus. Why, you ask? Well, he's topical. A very good evening to South African, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience, Mr. Valentine, please, there you see them there. Thank you very much indeed. As always, good to have them on the program. We are going to get their burning questions and comments for our guests in a short while, so stand by. And just remember, digital audience, if you have any comment or question, please raise your virtual hand and I'll do my very best to get you into this conversation. It is an unprecedented and extraordinary time for our constitutional democracy. That's how the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, reportedly described it. The president reiterated the statement he made in his submissions to the independent panel, saying he endeavored throughout his tenure as president not only to abide by the oath, but to set an example of respect for the Constitution. So the big question is, did the president of the Republic of South Africa disrespect the Constitution? The very person who has been lauded and respected as the co-convener of this country's internationally acclaimed constitution. A constitution, mind you, that was approved by the Constitutional Court on this very day, 26 years ago, exactly 26 years ago. The president denies violating his oath in any way. Your voice matters on this program. So we have a live audience for you tonight. My colleague Mahiketla Motlabe, there you see his handsome face. He's live for us in Constitutional Hill in Bloemfontein. He's there to canvass the views, getting the voice of the people on this very topical issue in this country. Mahi, good to see you, good to see the digital audience. We'll come back to you in a short while, which leads us to the question of the week. And we're asking you, President Cyril Ramaphosa is seriously considering taking the Section 89 panel report on review. What do you make of these developments? Please send us your thoughts at It's Topical SABC. Walk with me while I get you more context. So, when the president is considering taking this on review, is it a signal, a clearer signal, that he doesn't intend to resign? Can the president mount a reasonable challenge against impeachment if it gets to that point? We will discuss shortly.
So help me God.
All right, let me give you an overview of tonight's discussion, and for that we turn to the magic wall for more context. Now, the independent panel concluded that the information they have discloses prima facie, which basically means at face value, right? Or there is enough evidence that calls for rebuttal from the accused, that the president may have committed, one, a serious violation of Section 96(2)A, which says that the members of the cabinet and deputy ministers may not undertake any other paid work. Let's also have a look at this. Now, a serious violation, number two, of the Section 34(1) of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities, which deals with the duty to report corrupt transactions. And it says, in part, that any person who holds a position of authority and who knows or ought reasonably to have known or suspected that any other person has committed the offense of theft, fraud, extortion, forgery, or uttering a forged document involving an amount of 100,000 rand or more, must report such knowledge or suspicion or cause such knowledge or suspicion to be reported to any police official. What does number three say? Well, a serious misconduct in that the president may have violated Section 96(2)B by acting in a way that is inconsistent with his office. Now, Section 96(2)B, what does it say? Well, it talks about acting in any way that is inconsistent with their office or expose themselves to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and private interests. And the last one, may have a serious misconduct in the president violating Section 96(2)(b) by exposing himself to a situation involving a conflict between his official responsibilities and his private business. So I was reading with regards to the independent panel what they said in their report, that they were mindful of the fallibility of human nature and that too much power corrupts. The Constitution has, among others, safeguards, a built-in safety valve, they say, the impeachment and removal from office process. So this means that the power of impeachment is an important check on the executive branch. It holds the president accountable. Remember, the National Assembly is the only entity that has the power to impeach and remove the president from office. So the big question is, will it get to that point? Is there enough evidence to support impeachment? We will discuss shortly. As you know, this show gives you a voice, right? And tonight's word on the street, we went to the citizens in Rosebank, Johannesburg, and gave them a chance to speak directly to the president as he contemplates his next move. This is what they had to say. Is so important on this program on the SABC News channel. Why? Because it informs the strategy and streamlines the strategy of getting to that better place that we always talk about. So we're going to discuss this in greater detail with regards to the legality as well as the practicality. What is at stake here? Let's discuss. We've got a number of guests lined up via Zoom as well. We also have in studio Mr. Mzwanele Manyi from ATM, Head of Policy. Good to see you. Hi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Our digital audience is here as well. Big day, big week in country, South Africa. I wonder though, your party put forward the notice of motion to basically put those charges to the president. Feel vindicated now?
We are now more than vindicated. And firstly, I must thank you for your introduction. I think it was perfect. And perhaps before we even start, give me the opportunity to clean up two things very briefly. Some of your various experts, including some Advocate Manyi, Advocate Madonsela, even Dr. Posa, they make some fundamental mistakes in dealing with this matter. The first issue, they argue that this has got nothing to do with Section 34. And yet what you read there included theft. So I encourage them to go and read the act. In fact, I've posted it on my Twitter so that they go and read that thing. Section 34, subsection 1B has got theft. So this thing is in the bag in terms of being looked at. Number one. Number two, some people are making an argument that President is not in the list of people that are designated to be the authorities that should be held accountable for this. But the very same act, if you go there again, Section 34, subsection 4E, you will see that they talk about a close cooperation member of that close corporation is the accountable authority that must report such criminality. And the President Ramaphosa is actually the sole member of the Ntabanyoni close corporation, which is the one that is the trading entity in there.
So the Section
therefore,
34,
so therefore, just to round up,
right.
So therefore, President Ramaphosa, all the charges that have been laid to him have been properly verified to stick.
The Section 34 talks about the duty to report corrupt transactions.
Yes. Go to B.
Then
before you go there.
Then do you have to assume that those transactions are corrupt in order for this act to apply in this regard?
Even before it's corrupt, this is why I wanted you, maybe you read that thing too quickly. You must actually open it up, and those that...
I've got it in front of me here.
Just look at B. What does B say? Just read B.
B says the offence of theft, fraud, extortion, forgery, uttering. Yeah.
You see, so therefore, theft is a standalone. It's a standalone. It's a list of things. There's an or. Those are all independent kinds of offences. So theft is a standalone. By the way, even if you were to want to argue this is not corrupt, this is corrupt in any event. Why is it corrupt? What is corruption? Corruption is abuse of official position for personal gain. In this instance, we have a president of the country who's abusing his position for personal gain. So that's just corruption 101.
Well, that needs to be tested, isn't it?
I mean, that's not the big issue for now. The big issue for now is the theft that does not need to be tested. Theft has been confirmed. He's been on record saying so much has been stolen. We can tick a box, there was theft. We can tick a box that there's been no proper reporting. In fact, in terms of proper reporting, I want to also point out to your eminent panel here that they must also look at section, the SAPS Act, Act number 10 of 2012, which amended or fine-tuned section 34 of PRECA, where there's been much more refinement on the kind of police official you should report to. You don't just walk around and tell your bodyguards that this has happened when such a thing has happened.
But it says any police official. Aren't they police officials?
But that's what I'm saying to you, that you must then go to, that was amended in 2012 by SAPS Act number 10 of 2012, which then says that police official must be a DPCI of a police official, not just any. So that's what the law says.
Let's test that with a legal expert. Advocate Romeo Nthambeleni. Does Mr. Manyi have a point here? Did the panel get it right, and those who are saying that it's wrong in terms of misreading or application of the law, they don't have a point? What's your take?
Good evening to my fellow panelists and Mr. Manyi as well. I'm not sure if Mr. Manyi is a lawyer by training or by profession. And in terms of the interpretation of what he's actually saying, even lawyers differ in terms of interpretation of what he's actually saying that has been amended relating to the theft, including the president's theft. So what I can actually say quickly on this point is that what we're dealing with is that the president was not charged with anything. There was a Section 89 panel which was brought by the notice of motion which ATM has rightfully brought, and there were findings that were made by that committee. And then we are laying down now that the president is going to review the findings of that committee in the Constitutional Court. So without the confirmation by a court, with a status of a high court or even the Constitutional Court, we cannot come here and do an interpretation of law and statutes when we are not clothed with that judicial authority to be able to interpret the law correctly, lest we mislead the public and the society at large. Thank you very much.
But that review is actually premature in that this is just a preliminary investigation. These are not just findings. What typically people review are findings, binding findings, as it were. So for now, that report is not even binding to Parliament as things stand. It's just a preliminary thing. The panel was asked to do a very simple thing. The panel was meant to go and sniff out if there's anything. That's all they needed to do, just sniff out. They went, they sniffed out, they came back, they said, there's a rotten, pungent smell, so somebody else must kick in. This is why now we must have an
I'm
impeachment.
not sure they use those exact words, but yeah.
That's why now we must then have an impeachment committee. The impeachment committee is going to deal with some of the things that Dr. Posa was raising. For instance, wanting oral evidence and all of that. That happens in the impeachment stage, not now. Right now, it was just paperwork, just to see if anybody should waste their time. So they have found that there's prima facie evidence for that impeachment committee to kick in.
You raise an important issue with regards to prima facie, Advocate Nthambeleni. The difference between prima facie and sufficient evidence. Is there much into it in terms of the difference between these two?
Yeah, absolutely. There is much into it, because when you say prima facie, you are actually saying that there is a case that the person actually has to actually answer. And then before we get lost and carried away, we have to look at the mandate of the committee. And then whether the mandate of the committee, they were closed with that authority to make a determination that the president has made violations that are allegedly made in terms of that particular report. And I think that's very, very much important. So the issue of prima facie and the issue of the evidential of ways evidence that is actually called forward is very, very much important in terms of the interrogation of that type of evidence. And we must not fool ourselves. There were just statements, some statements, and so, those are the things that the committee was actually faced with, and they actually interrogated, and they said, based on what they have in their hand, there might be a prima facie case to actually answer. And when those issues are not ventilated properly in court, we can subject the president to the public opinion and actually find him guilty without actually having confirmation.
But you must remember that this panel did not start from zero. There was a submission, a very well argued, very well motivated submission by the ATM, where, in our view as ATM, we put what in our view was prima facie. And then you had these eminent people, judges and advocates, that had to look at what ATM had put on the table, what UDM has put on the table, what EFF has put on the table, to see if what ATM is saying is actually got any gravitas.
But the point, Mr. Manyi, is that evidence is information that has been tested and can hold on its own. Do you think this evidence has been tested in the short period of time that that panel has been around?
Which one do you want to pick? The first one, that the case was not reported. There is no case number. So we tick a box, that is ticked. On that alone, he can be impeached. So that is, we can tick a box right there. There is no argument all around that there's no case number, therefore the case was not properly reported. Tick a box, number one. Number two, the issue of paid work. The man is on record saying, I'm a businessman, I sell livestock. He was on with his own mouth, has said this. And in his own affidavit, he then tried to run away from that and said, no, actually, it's the CC that's doing this in Ntabanyoni CC. And forgetting that the Ntabanyoni CC is actually, a CC is listed as an authority that needs to make that needs to report if such a thing happens. So the fact that that CC did not report means that Ramaphosa did not report, means that Ramaphosa is actually guilty in terms of that section. This is straightforward.
Ongama Mtimka, is it as straightforward as Mr. Manyi is putting it? If you can unmute, Ongama.
Good evening to you and your viewers, as well as the panel members. I don't want to be drawn to that aspect of the debate. For me, the issue here is that you expect a president of the republic to be above board, especially somebody like President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's been rebuilding institutions, and there's evidence that indeed he has. I don't even want to go to the conclusions. Go and look at the sections in the report that relate to the claims about the origination of the funds. The version of the president, as well as the version of Mr. Arthur Fraser, both of which have been regarded as hearsay. But the holes that have been poked, or in fact, the questions that arise from the president's version alone, in terms of the businessman, whether there were prior arrangements made for him to come into the country, the fact that the buffaloes have not been taken from there, the absence of records in terms of whether or not the money coming in the country was declared. Leave everything else out of it, and you have reasonable political grounds on questions of ethics and integrity of the kind of people that the president of a republic would deal with. And the gray area around the movement of money. Remember, we are dealing with a country in parts of the world, South Africa, which is, by the way, on threat of grey listing, where the illicit financial flows are rampant. So from when these allegations surfaced and the delays that the president took in order to respond to them, there is a cause for concern here, which for me needed to have the president.
Oops, did we just lose Ongama?
Take the nation.
Go on, Ongama.
Into his confidence.
Into his confidence is not coherent. People think that we're buying into an RT script when it's actually common sense. The president, indeed has had many people at the party level, has had reforms that have been consequential, as well as at the level of the state.
Right.
When some of us raise these issues, we raise it on the basis purely of the ideals that we cherish.
Right.
That we would expect somebody who plays the role that the president plays to act or to protect himself against these kinds of things. And where his fault is, he appears to have faltered, there has to be accountability.
Right.
Notwithstanding the fact that most of the people who are opposed to him are people who are bringing a fight back against some of the gains at a party and state level.
Basically, the authority to impeach is firmly rooted in the issue of principle of accountability. Ongama, stand by. I'm going to come back to you a short while. Also, Professor Kotza. I just need to go to my colleague Mark Ketlamatlabe. He's out for us in Braamfontein, getting the voice of the people, canvassing the views. What are they saying, Mark?
Yeah, good evening to you, Blaine. But first of all, let me just tell you where we are. We are at the Constitution Hill, just next to the Concord, where obviously huge judgments are delivered. But first of all, this is where you get to see on the walls of the Constitution Hill our fallen heroes, those who fought hard for this democracy. Blaine, you've got O.R. Tambo here, just a few steps further, Albert Luthuli, again, right that side there, Joe's Lobo. But here is the big point. When you pass by the Concord, you come across this here, preamble to the Constitution of South Africa, 1996. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. But I want to come here, improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person and build a united and democratic South Africa. Here's the key word, united. At this juncture, at this point in time, opinions remain divided, Blaine. And talking about all these injustices of the past here, I'm going to pick up this cable here. You'll just forgive me. You hear songs ringing on my right-hand shoulder. These are some of the elderly citizens who have been camping outside the Constitutional Court. They are singing songs demanding rights. Just before we got here, we heard them sing songs about the current President, Cyril Ramaphosa. What is the issue here? We're going to hear from them now. The issue is that it seems that their rights have actually been violated. Well, some saying that the current president is not listening to them. Some of them saying again, we are the victims of apartheid. We want reparations. But let's bring in Nomarashia, who's the coordinator here, to talk to us about what's happening here. Marashia, just talk to us. What's the issue here? We see elderly people sleeping outside, and we understand it's been weeks since they've been here.
The people who you are seeing today, it's the victims and survivors of apartheid, gross human rights violation, who want to get a proper reparation. We've been here, it's about 3 months here now, been sleeping outside the Constitutional Court, trying to engage with the government. That means our President Ramaphosa and also our Minister of Justice, Lamula. The issue here is that we have been talking to them, trying to make sense to our government to say that we need them to create a platform to rectify the wrongs of the TRC, the unfinished business of the TRC, whereby most of the people were excluded, and also some who went also to the TRC, they never get a proper reparation. So we said that we need that platform to be created for us. We've been going to all the doors, all the levels. They told us that the only people who are going to be able to help us is the president, who is responsible to give us a proper reparation, to give us that platform. And we also told them we have given our demands to them. They are unable to come and give us what we are looking for, and they respond. We also told them that we are not going to go anyway besides that they can give us an interim relief hardship for us to sleep on the cement outside our Constitutional Court for months and months in order to open their ears to even be recognized by them that there is a need. They are recognizing the perpetrators. They've given the perpetrators amnesty. They've given the perpetrators pardon. They've given the perpetrators parole. But they don't want to open the doors for victims and survivors who are dying on a daily basis. Even here, we've got a person who died while we are asking the government to give us a proper reparation.
Now, with that being said, there are calls for the president to resign. Talk to us about that. What do you think of that?
The president, the issue here in South Africa, and also with all the politicians and with all the political parties which are in parliament, not a single one were able to listen to us. But when the issues are for themselves, they stand up, they open even doors in an urgent basis, because this issue of Phala Phala is been something which is done current, it's a recent thing, but they are able to create doors, they are able to talk about it, they are able to come up with that, we must come with a decision. Why they don't listen to us? Because the first step to us is to get a reparation. Then we can talk about what they are doing. All the parties which are there, which we voted, they don't even care about the victims and survivors who put them there. Whether Ramaphosa is going or not, we want him to give us our reparation, and not him alone, together with other parliamentarians whom we voted.
Let's just say he resigns. How else do you expect him to give you the reparations?
The government. There he does have a deputy. He does have all the other ministers like Department of Justice. We need justice here. We need reparation. Department of Justice, according to even the law, it's their responsibility to help us. We are sleeping outside here. We don't have food. We don't have toilets. We don't have shelter. Our dignity. We need our dignity to be restored in South Africa. We need the fruits of this liberation.
Let's talk about it, Ntate Shabalala. What is your experience? I understand you are a victim of the past injustice.
I experienced a lot to the government, because the government always time when we call him to come to us and talk with us, he don't want. It's about 27 years now. The government is not think about us, only think what they think about their cases that are on the parliament, but on the grassroots level, they are not coming. But when it's election time, it's whereby they come to us and need some eggs to us. Now, this is the last time that we'll put an eggs for them. Why? Because they are not doing right for us as a victim of an apartheid.
Do you think the Phala Phala issue is actually diverting attention to what's happening here?
Yes, you are quite right about to say that. Why? Because the whole parliamentary, all the political who are on the parliament, they are not care about the victim. Only thing what they are care about the cases of the parliament. And they are looking each other. The one that will make a mistake, they are there. But the case that they must take, like this one, that we are here, this is a serious case of changing the country on what they are doing. Now we need everything to be correct by the right.
All right. Let me just get a few voices of the young people here, Blaine, before I bring it back in studio. Just talk to us. I mean, calls for President to actually step down amid the Phala Phala issue. What is your take on it? Just quickly.
I'm doing a chai straight. Ayikho indaba yakhe. Ayikho into asiza ngayo buko umama basokola kanjani. Usenzela thina njenge youth kunina ngene. Akachai straight.
What do you think of it?
Can you please repeat the question?
President calls for him to resign amid the Phala Phala issue. As a young person, what do you have to say about it?
I think I wouldn't want someone to lose their job, but he should resign because right now, load shedding is more than ever before. Youth unemployment rate is now higher than ever before. And now I see homeless people here at Constitutional Court, while it was, and it's especially old people. So that's disappointing.
Thanks so much indeed. Blaine, I've never been in President's shoes. I don't know how it feels like, but just over this placard here, over these trees here, there's that fire there. And the only thing one could say is one thing for sure. That president's seat is getting hotter by day. For now, it's back to you in studio.
All right. Instructive reporting. Mark Iketla Motlabi, Life for Us and Property. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your reporting. Important to hear the views there of the people. Some feel that the president should resign, but there are others that feel this is just a diversion from the real issues on the ground. People are not paying attention. Politicians are not paying attention to those people. What do you say?
No, I don't think they think it's a diversion. I think, firstly, everything that has been raised is crucial. It's very important. The diversion is actually the SABC strategy, that in this kind of a program where we're dealing with Phala Phala, you bring these kinds of things. Basically, SABC is trying to create a diversion itself to say, instead of focusing to Phala Phala, focus on the people.
But these are the real views. These are, I mean, we didn't organize that group
the timing of raising these views.
These are the real views of people.
There's many
who are feeling that they are neglected. But this issue is getting
for you
so much
to
attention.
bring it toe to toe with Phala Phala. It's actually an SABC strategy to dilute the attention on Phala Phala.
I guarantee you it's
those
not a strategy
matters
for the
are
SABC,
very
but go on,
important. They must be addressed. No issues. It's not the only issue. There's load shedding, there's water, there's people that are sharing water with animals. There's plenty of these problems. But for you to bring them when you're dealing with Phala Phala, it's an SABC strategy for diversion.
Look, I must say, that is not a strategy. These are the real issues on the ground. Thuli Madonsela, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, Professor Director of the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University. Social justice is what many people are calling for as well. While we're dealing with the issue of Phala Phala, two things can be true at the same time, Professor. Let's look at the issue of PRICA. And I know you think that the panel might have erred. In what way, ma'am?
Well, thank you. Greetings to colleagues on the program and to the viewers as a whole. Firstly, I just want to indicate that I have the greatest of respect for the chair of the panel, Justice Ngobo, and I quote him all the time. He's a brilliant judge. And therefore, this is not an attack on his person. But even the greatest of legal minds can make mistakes. That's why we have reviews and appeals. And that's why sometimes dissenting judgments grow eventually to become main judgments maybe a decade later or 2 decades later. So that's the context. The main mistake is section 34(1). I get it that the panel says it is regarding the president as one of the responsibility bearers under the Act because of owning a close corporation. I get that. Which then muddies the issue of the farm being a farm like any other farm and a homestead. But to say when he reported that to Rode, that was not reporting is quite far-fetched. But even more far-fetched is to say that it was the intention of the legislature to say that in section 34(1), all of those that can be classified as persons in authority have a duty to report all corruption to the Special Directorate, to the Hawks.
Yes. Not
by any stretch. It's impossible because part 1, 2, 3, 4, and sections 20 and 21 deal with every corruption. Just if you see somebody bribing a traffic officer with 5 rand, this interpretation that is being given today is saying you must report not to the police, any police officer you can find. You must go and find the Special Directorate and report it to them.
But doesn't the Act talk about an amount of over 100,000? Isn't that significant?
No. That's where people are making a mistake. And I've said to people, read the Act slowly and read it in its entirety. So section 34 has, it's section 34(1)A and B.
Right.
So the duty that is being imposed is not to report theft only. It's to report all of the corrupt acts in part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and section 20 and section 21 in part 6, plus theft, forgery, and all of the other crimes that are included in B. So it is honestly unreasonable, with due respect, irrational, to think that that was the intention of the legislature, that for every corrupt act, because any act that involves gratification is corruption, and usually a lot of them are just bribes, must now be reported to the Special Directorate.
So the way you put it is that if somebody doesn't report it, then they are guilty. Any person can be guilty of a crime.
According to this extreme interpretation, then if you don't report any of those crimes in section 34(1) to the Special Directorate, you're breaching the Act. Whereas my understanding, in terms of the actual wording, without the changes in the South African Police Service Amendment Act, is that all you're required is to do 2 things: report to any police officer, and of course, protectors are police officers, or cause to be reported. And if it is true that the current Act says everything must be reported to the Hawks, then the Act is not only irrational, it's unconstitutional. And therefore the panel should have picked that up.
Well, Mr. Manyi earlier said that it was amended to...
Yeah, no, she made reference to that. But you see, what the advocate is not, not being forthright about is that she does not like what is there. But the issue we're talking about now is not whether she likes the Act as currently formulated, is what the Act says as we speak. The issue here is that And she uses the word everything. There's not everything there. There's 100,000 cutoff to deal with the kind of issue that she's trying to raise. That 100,000 perhaps talks to the level of sophistication in terms of investigating that crime. This is why you have to go to DPCI, because at DPCI, this is where you're going to get all the kinds of skills, as it were, which you won't find in the run-of-the-mill police station. So for her to now say, oh, this is too much, well, that's what the law says. Up until the law is reviewed, that's what the law says.
Professor Madonsela, you're shaking your head vigorously.
Vehemently. Mr. Manyi saying, read section 34.1. Unfortunately, my computer is just switched off.
Sorry, Advocate. Sorry to interrupt you. Can you ask him to just read it?
Don't interrupt me.
No,
let
just
me
saying,
finish the sentence.
can you just read it for him?
Let Professor Madonsela complete her point.
Can you just let me finish, because I did let you finish.
Go on, Professor.
Nothing is going to run away. We're still going to be here when I finish. Okay.
Go ahead, Professor.
Okay, thank you, sir. So section 34.1 has A and B, and A and B are talking to the same group. So section 34.1 says, if you are a person in authority and you have witnessed or suspect that a corrupt crime in terms of part 1, 2, 3, 4, and sections 20 and 21, or the other crimes that are included in B, which is theft, forgery, etc. So, Mr. Manyi, what I'm saying is that you are asked to report all of these things. In terms of PRECA, you're asked to report this to any police official. Right. Then there's an amendment in the South African Police Services Act, which our reading is that it was meant for if you are reporting to the Special Investigations Directorate. It was meant for that. But if you're going to stretch that and say, this is when you're reporting any of the requirements of reporting and say in terms of section 84, because it's not just the money, it's forgery. It is, it's all of the crimes that are mentioned, even under B.
Right.
So all of those crimes must be reported to the hawks. And you're not talking about the president. You're talking about every person who's mentioned in those 10 categories. Right. How many, let's just think about it. How many closed corporations are owned in this country? And if you say every crime that is witnessed in those closed corporations or by leaders in those closed corporations must go straight to the hawks. It can't be. It's impossible that the legislator had wanted it to be so.
Let me bring in Professor Dirk Coetzee into the conversation. Sir, if you can unmute with regards to, well, the interpretation and the application of this law and this act, diverse views. Where do you land on it, sir? If you can unmute, Professor. Thank you so much. Are you having a bit of an issue with that? Go ahead, Professor. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm obviously not a lawyer, so I'm hesitant to become engaged in a sort of a legal interpretation of it. My profession is political science. So I can talk more about the procedures in Parliament, the idea of impeachment, and where we stand at the moment in terms of the options of President Ramaphosa. But I simply don't have the background and the expertise to talk about the legal issues.
What do you make then, Professor, of this process thus far? And in terms of the conclusions that were made by the panel regarding the prima facie evidence and that the president may have violated certain sections of the Constitution. This process, unprecedented in South Africa, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think this point is very important that you mentioned. It's the first time. So everyone is going through a learning process of how exactly first of all, the part of this Constitution, Section 89, as well as the regulations that were formulated, how to implement them. So for this panel, for example, that is also an experience, and they set a type of a precedent. And I think that is for me to start with an important point. Because if we are now in a situation where this panel have submitted their report, and many people in public regards this as that they have actually found President Ramaphosa guilty of the 4 points that were presented by the ATM in their motion to them. Then the question becomes, first of all, is that the real intention and the mandate of this panel to do this? Is it not that they must have done a much more of a preliminary process and not come to so strong conclusions, but rather say there's reason for Parliament to consider an impeachment process, that they are not going to waste their time, that there is evidence, there is reason to believe that such a process will be necessary, and stop there.
Yeah.
Because as we are now, where we are now, is that because there's so much pressure now on President Ramaphosa to resign, it means it raises the question, but is in future, if something similar is going to happen, an impeachment of a president, don't we only need the panel? And they come to a conclusion, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
Because this is effectively where we are at the moment. There's so much, those who are calling for his resignation basically said he has been found guilty.
Yeah.
And because of that, there is so strong reason for his resignation that he must do it. If there's the interpretation that this committee was preliminary in nature, then they will say, well, let's take it now to Parliament. Tuesday is the election in Parliament, and then a decision is taken there. Depending on it, it can either be the end of the process, or it can be the beginning of a multi-party parliamentary committee, similar to what is at the moment in process for the public protector. And they will do the investigation, and then ultimately a decision will be taken by the National Assembly. Other point which I think is important is that if there's so much convincing evidence that crimes were committed, why were they not reported by anyone to the police? And that the criminal process took care of President Ramaphosa. Because an impeachment process is essentially a political process, not only in South Africa, all over the world, in the US, in Brazil where it was used, in South Korea where it was used, and most of the presidential systems have an impeachment process. Because the investigation as well as the decisions, whether it is the one of Tuesday, whether that must continue or not, or the final decision are taken by the members of the National Assembly, not by a panel of jurists. So it becomes a political decision. And therefore, I think one should keep that in mind. There is some legal components. It's a quasi or hybrid system. But the final decision is not a judgment by the chairperson or by a judge. The final decision is by the members of the National Assembly.
Professor, thank you very much, Mr. Manyi. I'll come back to you in a short while. We're running fast out of time. Portia, let me just bring you into the conversation with regards to the authority to impeach is obviously deeply rooted in the issue of principle of accountability. So, having said that, shouldn't the president, if he's going to go to this process, go through it and not simply resign? What do you think, Portia? If you can unmute, Portia. All right, let's try that. Go ahead.
Blaine. Please, can you repeat the question for me? Sorry.
Should the president go through this process, given that an impeachment, if it gets to that process, is deeply rooted in the principle of accountability and not simply resign? What do you think?
I think the president must just resign to save our country. I wouldn't say to save his image because of that he's doing that to himself. I think he must resign because this is the same president who said he's not going to interfere with the investigations when this whole matter started. And then it's the same president 2 days ago or 3 days ago who begged the independent panel not to further probe. So I don't understand what is he saying in the same breath because of he said he's not going to interfere with the investigations, and now he's saying he's ordering the panel not to further probe the Phala Phala saga. So I think he's interfering. He must resign because of it's not helping.
Professor Zwelinzima, do you agree with regards to should the president resign and take a step back so the process can continue? Would that help?
I think for me, the calls for the president to resign are premature. Because if people are basing this argument, I'm not a legal expert, only on the report of the panel, then people must know that this is part of, this is the first phase of many phases that the legislatures would have to go through in really dealing with the president. So I do think that is premature. But having said that, I think the president has a responsibility. You would remember that when the president came to office, came at a very difficult time, when there was lack of leadership in the country, when there were challenges basically in terms of leadership, and he was seen as this person that was there to rescue the country and looked at as a person that is beyond reproach. And whether this report is correct or not, whether the panel interpreted the laws correctly or not, for me, I think at one point it is immaterial. We want a president that is beyond reproach, and that's important to have a president that is beyond reproach for certainty, for public trust, for ensuring also that governance, there is trust in governance. The president has practically not been seen for the past 5 days or so. We are actually as a country on autopilot, and that's worrying that the president is nowhere to be found. I would have expected the president who
it seems that we
has public support. I think that's good, because you would remember that the last survey that was done is that the president is actually more popular than his organization. I think he must leverage on that capital, or that social capital, to engage with South Africans, to talk to South Africans, take responsibility.
Tina Bella, let's bring you in. Do you expect your president to be a model of rectitude? And that's the very high standard that a president needs to hold or adhere to. What do you think? Is it premature to call for his resignation? If you can unmute, Tina. All right, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me on the show tonight. I think it is a bit premature to ask him to resign. First of all, are we 100% sure that he is definitely guilty? If that is the case, I think he must live up to his conscience and do what is right. In James 4, verse 17, the Bible says, "For him that knows what is right to do and he doesn't do it, then for him it is a sin." So I believe he should live up to his presidency, to his status, whatever they want to call it these days, and do the right thing, come clean, say what must be done, and then let the law take its
Tina Bella, thank you very much. Let the law take its course. Modibe, go ahead, and then Lawrence.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I want to first congratulate the ATM, Mr. Manyi, congratulate the EFF, congratulate Mziliga South Africa, and congratulate the economic freedom fighters. I think we're wasting our time here, and I think South Africans are watching this program and are very disappointed. We're witnessing professors like Mzwanele Manyi and professors like Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who are an embarrassment to black people. It's a simple issue. Let's say the president, the money that was stolen in Phala Phala was from the sale of cattle. As a president, he knows that in this country, even the biggest gangsters who deal drugs in this country, they deal with the South African rand. Why did the South African president conduct his business with dollars and then does not disclose those dollars? That itself is a crime. We're here having discussions, talking big English, but the people on the ground are not giving them what they really have to know. And you have a professor like Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who has been protecting the status quo for many years. It's just like, I must agree with my uncle, Jimmy Manyi, Matthew Sposa. The only reason why Matthew Sposa is going against this report is because it's against David Mabuza. That's the only reason why he's going against this report, understand? So we must ask yourself a fundamental question. How did the money come into this country? There's something we call control movement. Does that person exist? Which entry did he come through?
So there's lots
did
of
he fly through,
lots
did he
of
fly
questions.
through the military base? Did he fly through the airport or Tambo? Did he declare which states did he come through? There's no evidence of that. We're now sitting here discussing things here which don't matter. Did the president disclose that there were dollars in his house? He didn't disclose that. Did he disclose a crime? He didn't disclose it. The Constitution says when the crime is committed, you must go and report to the police station.
Having said that, then
did not go in and report that case to the police. He didn't.
Modiba,
So
shouldn't it then be? Shouldn't these?
About things that don't matter.
Modiba, shouldn't this evidence then, or information, prima facie evidence, be tested in court?
But I think we're playing into the narrative of trying to protect Cyril Ramaphosa now, because the Constitution says, I mean, this thing is very clear. We're not even supposed to have this discussion here. Money was stolen, dollars, a huge amount of dollars. If you are caught with 100,000 or a huge amount of money, you get arrested or you get fined. Why didn't the president disclose that? Does SARS know about those dollars? How did they come into this country?
Right,
Simple question. We don't have to go far. We don't have to go far. And then we must listen to people like Thuli Madonsela. We must listen to people like Matthew Sposa. We're an embarrassment to black people.
Do we have Professor Madonsela?
No, we can't be listening.
Lawrence, Lawrence, let me get Lawrence's take, and Professor, I'll give you the word, last word. Lawrence, go on.
Evening, Blaine. I share the very same sentiment with a few callers or few panels there. I think calling for President to resign, that would be very premature. I mean, even the Chief Justice or former Chief Justice Novo did mention that they didn't get all the information that they were looking for, asking for. So for me, that report was merely an information and not evidence. It's not tested. To me, when you read that report, you end up realizing that that was a fundamental error of law.
All right. Lawrence, let's leave it there. We're fast running out of time. Let's bring in Professor Thuli Madonsela to respond to what Modibe had to say. Go ahead, Professor.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Modibe, I'm afraid we're having two conversations at one time. I have not said that the president should not be held accountable and that any of the questions that you are raising should not be asked. I've just said the decision of this panel is wrong in law. And I've specified which are the areas where they are wrong, Section 34(1). And I now have it in front of me. Any person who holds a position of authority and who knows or ought reasonably to have known or suspected that any other person has committed an offense under Part 1, 2, 3, or 4, or Section 20 or 21, insofar as it relates to 6, the offense of theft, fraud, extortion, forgery, or artery, a forged document involving an amount of 1,000 rand or more, must report such knowledge or suspicion, or cause such knowledge or suspicion to report it to any police station. The amount of 100,000 is in relation to theft, fraud, extortion, forgery, and artery.
Right.
But A deals with ordinary corruption crimes that are not in relation to that kind of amount.
Right.
So you're talking about these offenses and you're now delinking them because A is not 100,000 rand or more.
So the professor is saying that
is just any corruption, which is just a bribery of 5 rand, must now be reported to the hawks.
Prof, we're running out of time. I'm so sorry to cut you off there, but basically you're saying that the act needs to be looked at in its entirety. Mr. Manyi, last word to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the Prof reads into the act what he wants to see, instead of reading what is there. The act is very clear that there's a whole list with a joining word or. So they've got the same status, all of these things that are there, they are all offences. And also the brief of the panel was not to declare anyone guilty. So they didn't declare anybody guilty. That was not their brief. Their brief was just to sniff and see if there's anything rotten. And they found something rotten. And they've stuck to their brief. Lastly, I think it's very important that we understand that the president of this country, Cyril Ramaphosa, has broken his oath of office. Section 83B of the Constitution says he must uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution. By him not reporting this thing, this is the one thing that everybody here agrees on. Let's just stick with that one. By him not reporting as a sole member of the close corporation, he has violated the Constitution, he has violated his oath of office.
Let's leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. No doubt we'll be talking about this through this week. We'll see how it plays out in Parliament as well with regards to the debate. Thank you very much to our digital audience as well. Professor Thuli Madonsela there giving us her take. Here's my take. When you hear that a head of state may have committed a serious violation of the sections of the Constitution, the air becomes thick with uncertainty. At this stage, we are a community of people who are living a shared agony of the unknown. What happens next? What is the most appropriate way forward? If anything, as the presidency admitted, the Section 89 process has presented an unprecedented and extraordinary moment for South Africa's constitutional democracy. So with constitutional accountability in mind, the question becomes, what actions need to be taken now to ensure the sustainability of this constitutional democracy? We shall see. Which, by the way, is often three of the most loaded words in politics. Just a reminder, please go to our YouTube channel and watch this episode again, SABC It's Topical. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.